It is 21 minutes past 11 o'clock, and if you are just tuning into the Voice of Truth Revamped, I've been speaking with Jennie Blood of Affix over the course of the night, and we're just going to pick up where we left off. And in the last session, we were talking about just how much God has been working in this band, how much, God's just been pulling strings right and left. And your story with the band, there's a lot along that line, too. Can you tell us that story? Okay. Tell that story.
And you said I had a few minutes for this, right? Okay.
We're good. Go.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story. At least I think it is. All right. It dates back to Christmas of 2008, which I know was such a long time ago, over 2 years ago. There's a Starbucks in Zanesville, for those of you who don't know. I'd imagine most of you do. A couple of friends and I were out there after dinner one night. We were tired. We didn't feel like doing anything, so we just got our coffees and we sat down and just kind of sank into a stupor without thinking too much about it. And then we noticed this group of 4 guys sitting in that circle of armchairs up front. And they were all drinking coffee and having this really in-depth spiritual conversation. And it was really cool, some of the stuff that they had to say. And so really, my friends and I didn't talk. We just kind of sat there and listened in on it. We didn't say anything. We just wanted to hear what was going on. And when it was about time for us to leave, I stood up and I leaned in and said, I want you to know that we had a lot of fun listening in on your conversation. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys turned around. He had a faux hawk, black with bright orange tips. Was wearing baggy sweatshirt and jeans and had his ears pierced several times and gauged on top of that. And he grinned at me just as sweetly as possible and said, next time join in. And I said, well, if there's a next time, maybe we will. And then I went over to throw away my coffee cup and noticed their bulletin board. There was a flyer on that bulletin board, and it said Impact on it. And Impact was a new community Christian group that was starting specifically for people between the ages of 18 and 30. Now, I was, I think, 24. Yeah, 24 at the time. I have to think about that. It was a long time ago. And I thought, you know what? That sounds like a lot of fun, because there really wasn't anything of the kind in the New Concord area. And so I asked my friends, do you want to go? And they said, we can't. We're eating at this person's house tomorrow. Why don't you go and check it out, and we'll come with you another time if they ever have one again. And I said, okay, sure. So the next night I drove back out to Zanesville. It took me 10 minutes just to find the building, because it was at a gallery that was sort of above the Army-Navy store in downtown Zanesville. I basically had to climb out and walk to find it. And I go up the steps and find this huge crowd of people. They were all dressed in the ugliest Christmas sweaters you have ever seen in your life. Apparently, you were supposed to wear an ugly Christmas sweater. I missed that memo. It was on the flyer. I just didn't notice it. So I was dressed normally, and I looked really out of place. And a guy came up to me, who I'd never seen before, grabbed my hand and said, you're new. I've never seen you. What's your name? It's so great to have you here. And I introduced myself. This guy's name was Adam. Really nice guy. I'm a good friend of his now. And he wanted to know how I'd found out about this event, because he'd never seen me. I didn't go to his church. And I said, well, I saw this flyer in Starbucks. And he looked at me and he said, really? And then leaned over his shoulder and yelled, hey, Heath! And over came the guy with the orange and black faux hawk I'd seen the night before in Starbucks. And Adam looks at this guy and says, dude, the flyer worked. She's here because of the flyer. And he turned and looked at me, and he goes, I just saw you last. And I said, yes, you did. And turns out this guy's name is Heath. Really nice guy. I'm friends with him and his wife now. He just got married about a year ago. Really nice girl. Her name's Emily. And I became really good friends with these people. It's a pretty cool crowd of people. Since then, they've started meeting on a night that I can't come. But for a while there, I was going to Impact meetings on a regular basis. That night, that first night, they had a guy there with them, and some of you may recognize this name, Abe Parker. Abe Parker is this tall kid with this shock of carrot-colored hair, and he was standing there in a plaid flannel shirt and blue jeans, holding a guitar. And Adam said, he's going to give us special music tonight. And I said, okay, this is interesting. So he started to play and sing, and I just started to sit there and drool, because he was so amazing. Possibly one of the best musicians I've ever seen in my life. I came up to him afterwards and asked if he had CDs, and he said yes, he's in this band called Rookie out of Asbury, Kentucky. And I bought 2 CDs because I wanted to give one to my sister for Christmas, and I didn't feel like sharing. And he was pretty thrilled about that one. And I looked at him and I said, I want you to friend me on Facebook. It's easier for you to find me because I have a really weird last name and you don't. So you find me on Facebook, you friend me, and I am going to get you a gig in New Concord one of these days. Now, fast forward to last April. Last April, I was called by some people from Unity Presbyterian Church in Cambridge saying that they're going to host this massive street concert for their youth program that they're going to call Empowered Event. And they wanted to know if my praise band would be willing to perform. And I said, well, we'd be willing, but I don't think we should because we're not really suited to it. But I'll tell you what, if I think of a band that I think would work for that, I'll let you know. Now fast forward to Memorial Day weekend. Just after that, I was in that same Starbucks and ran into Abe Parker, who lives in Kentucky. He goes to school in Kentucky. And so I looked at him and said, what are you doing here? Because this is Zanesville. This is not Asbury, Kentucky. And he said, one of the local churches invited us to do a gig here this weekend. We're going to be in that park behind Kroger. I said, I didn't know there was a park behind Kroger. He said, I didn't know either, but we're performing in it. So you should come. It's at 6 o'clock. And I said, sure, I'll come. So I showed up. I'm not going to miss hearing Rookie play. They're my favorite band. And so I showed up, got to hear a ton of their new stuff. They're a lot of fun. Some really great guys in that band. I bought their new album, which they just released, and I said, Abe, I need to talk to you because I promised you a gig 1.5 years ago. And I have one for you now. And so I got his contact information, and in my car, called the man responsible for starting Empowered Event and said, you have got to book this band. And they did. And so I was there for that street concert to watch Affix. And then while I was there, I ran into a girl named Kendra West, who I went to school with. She's a Muskingum University grad, too, back when it was Muskingum College. And I hadn't seen her in 6 years. And I said, Kendra, what are you doing here? I mean, it's awesome to see you, but what are you doing here? And she said, oh, my husband, Rich. He leads Affix. They're the band that's closing tonight. You should stick around and hear him, and maybe you could eat dinner with us afterwards. And so that's the first time I heard Affix live. They were amazing, because they always are. And then I went to eat dinner with them afterward, and Kendra was getting updated with me, and she asked how I lead the worship team at my church, because I was telling her I did, and I said I sing and play keys. And she said, really? Rich? She sings and plays keys. And Rich says, really? Chad, who was at another table, she sings and plays keys. Really? Eric at another table, she sings and plays keys. Really? Scott at another table, she sings and plays keys. It went the whole place. And I said, what's the big deal? And Rich said, we've been praying for a female vocalist who plays keys for the past 2 months. And I said, I'd join you in a heartbeat. And I auditioned, and here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, just like that. Just like that. There's...
So it dates back to a flyer in Starbucks, Christmas of 2008.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. And we are going to play this next song after we go into news because we're just about to reach 11:30. So.
Sorry.
So
you asked for it.
I did. I realize this, but
fair enough.
But yeah. So, music from Affix, the song Where You Are, coming up after the news break here on WMCO 90.7 Muskingum University Radio.